The other part of the story that we need to think about is 3 of 3 versus 2 of 3. That's very critical to getting the right levels. So if you look here, it says which requires these 3 key components. And you'll notice it says it for each and every single description. So this is a subcategory that the E&M guidelines are telling us that we have to meet or exceed every single bullet in order to code it. So for example, a level 5, we need a comprehensive history, comprehensive exam, and high medical decision making. If we only have moderate medical decision making, then we have to bump down to a level 4 because we meet the first 2 bullets, but we don't meet the 3rd bullet. So we gotta go down to the lowest one. And that's what this little rhyme is. When it's 3 of 3, code to the lowest. The lowest is always going to pull it down because of this, which requires these 3 key component statement. All right? So look at that again. You have, let's pick another one. What if you had a D, I pick a good one, a DCH. Okay, so what you're going to do for this system, DCH, so detailed history, comprehensive exam, and high medical decision making. So when you look at that, what I do is I say, okay, the D shows up at a level 3. I'm not assigning a level 3 yet. I'm just saying so far it's a level 3. The C makes it a level 4, and the H makes it a level 5. But if I try to make it fit a level 5, the first 2 bullets don't meet or exceed, so we have to scratch that one off. If we look at the level 4, we only have 2 of the 3 bullets, so we have to code to the lowest. It's going to be a level 3. So that's why the saying is when it's 3 of 3, code to the lowest. If you had a PCH, you got to code it a level 1, even though the other 2 elements are level 5. Now, hopefully, documentation won't be like that because that means the physician is, needs some education on documentation. Normally, you'll see them stair step along with each other, but there could be some wild permutations that way. And then if it's, like say, an established office patient, this phrase says which requires 2 of these 3 key components. Okay, so when you have that, then you can drop the lowest and code to the next lowest. So in our example we just did, we could drop the level 3, and we code to the next lowest, which was a level 4. Okay, so I'm going to show you how that works. Let me see how this pulls up. This is a leveling exercise that I've been using since 1999 to teach E&M coding. And it really works. Now, I tell the students when we first start doing this, they're like, what? And they're looking at each other's paper. But after about 10 minutes of doing this, all of a sudden they're like, oh, I get it. And it just starts clicking. So if it's not clicking for you in this small little segment, really it's a good system. Get the on-demand class and really work it out, and you'll see the light bulb will go off. And what it does too, it helps you if you've had access to E&M tools like those slide rules and different things like that. When I first started coding, I was collecting all that stuff. I couldn't figure out how to use it. I was like, I don't get this. But once I learned how to do it in my manual, then all those tools made sense and I could use them effectively. Okay, so it just helps you be, a better coder and even understand how encoders work and E&M scoring tools and that sort of thing. Okay, so here's how I do it. I just took permutations of the letters, and rather than stacking them on top of each other, I wrote them horizontally. So my PEL, for example, is problem-focused history, expanded problem-focused exam, low medical decision-making. And in hindsight, I should have done a poll for this. Let me bring this over here.
Good idea to have a poll. They can do shout-outs.
There you go. Unless, Boyd, do you want to quickly put in what is a CDM? And with the answers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is a CDM? Okay, so PEL. Okay, so let's see if I can get my screen in here to the left. Can you see both of that okay, Alicia?
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, so the P shows up on what level? It's going to be level 1. So what I do, I just put shorthand, and it really means 99201, but I'm just going to put the 1. And then the E shows up on level 2. So I'm going to put a 2 in here. And then the L shows up on level 3. Now I'm doing this in the column for an office new patient. So when it's 3 of 3, we code to the lowest. So what is the lowest here? It's going to be a level 1. Okay, so that means the answer is 99201 because the P pulled it down. All right, so a CCM. Now here's a situation where the C shows up on a level 4 and a level 5. When that's the case, we always give the physician the most credit for what he documented. So we're going to temporarily call it a 5. And the second C, for the second bullet for exam, we're also going to call it a 5. And the M shows up on a level 4. Okay? Now, of course, you're probably saying, well, Lorraine, it's right here, CCM. Yeah. Probably on the board exam, though, you won't get one that's exact. They're going to make you work for it. But that one happened to match exactly, so I didn't have to do all that leveling rigmarole, but we're going to call that a 99204. Okay? Now, a CCS, not to be confused with the credential, is going to be a 5, 5. And the S, because it shows up on level 1 and level 2, we're going to give it a level 2. Okay, we give the doctor the highest credit for what he or she did. So 99202 is the answer for that. So hopefully that's starting to click. Let's skip that one. Okay, CEH. Let me get out of the C's here. Let's do DPH. All right, so D shows up on what level? Level 3. And the P shows up at level 1. And the H shows up at level 5. Now that one's all over the map. Not probably normal, but it's possible. So if that's the case of 315, when it's 3 of 3, we code to the lowest. Painfully, it is a 99201. So now at this point, you might start thinking, well, everything that is a P is going to be a level 1, and you would be right. So you could literally go down, and you know this one's going to be a level 1. Anything with a P in it, that's going to be a level 1, because when it's 3 of 3, we code to the lowest, and that's the absolute lowest. Okay, so you get the idea with that, okay? All right, so for established, now we're not going to use a 99211 because that's technically a nurse visit and it's not a bulleted code. So your 99212 is a PPS, and here it says 2 of these 3 key components. Okay, so that's the same for the whole subcategory. Your 99213 is an EEL, and your 214 is a DDM, and your 215 is a CCH. Okay, so now let's do that for this PEL guy. Okay, so a PEL, I'm going to have to scroll, guys, sorry. The P shows up at a level 2. The E shows up at a level 3 only, so we're going to take a 3 over here. And then the L also shows up at a level 3. So when it is 2 of 3, we drop the lowest, so we can get rid of the 2, and we code to the next lowest. So it's going to be a level 3. So that's how you do the leveling for 2 of 3. Let's try a CCM. So we've got the 2 C's show up at 99215. So that's going to be a 5 and a 5 for the 2 C's, and then the M shows up at level 4. Now this is where it works out in favor for the physicians. When it's 2 of 3, we drop the lowest, so we're going to drop the 4, and we're going to code to the next lowest, which happens to be a 5. So that's a 99215, okay? Let's see, so we got, let's skip down to this one, DPH. So we see a D is on level 4. Okay, so we're going to put a 4 here. And then the P we had determined was on a level 2. And then the H, where does the H show up? That's a level 5. So when it's 2 of 3, we drop the lowest, which is the 2, and we code to the next lowest. So in this case, it's a 99214. We don't have to go to a 3. Okay, we go to the next lowest in this situation, so it's a 99214. Okay, so that's how you do leveling. 2 of 3 versus 3 of 3. Just convert those bulleted statements into letters, and then take those letters and convert them into the numbers. Now, what you end up doing, once this is like training wheels on the right, it kind of gets you used to the method. And then when you go to the board exam, or if you're using your book to do E&M coding, I start using my fingers. I'll say, okay, this one is at this level, this is at that level, this is at that level, and then I say the rhyme. If it's 3 of 3, code to the lowest, and then wherever my finger is on the lowest level, that's the code. I know that's the answer. If it's 2 of 3, I say get rid of the lowest, what's the next lowest? And you start doing it real quick in your mind, and you don't need, the training wheels or whatever you want to call it. So going back to my sheet here, you can see now a system for when you are on the board exam, or again, real world E&M coding. Figure out your location, get in the right category and subcategory. For the example I used, we picked office, and then we did new and established. Then abstract from your scenario that they're giving you what the level is, T, E, D, or C. And you can look in your E&M guidelines to figure out how to determine those levels. That could be a whole nother conversation. But the question asked of me for this was how to level. Okay, and the leveling helps, by the way, guys, when you go to do history coding, there's 3 pieces to history, and you need to code it 3 of 3. Whereas for medical decision making, there's 3 pieces, and you need to code it 2 of 3. So once you become a good leveler with this high level, okay, then you can do the more minute bean counting kind of stuff, and it'll all come together. And so it's just kind of an opposite way of teaching E&M. Oftentimes when I was first coding and I would attend sessions on E&M coding, the presenters would always start from the details. Okay, we're going to start with history, and they would break history all apart, but I didn't get where I was in context. So by doing it from this way, I take the higher view and work down. And it just seems, for me, because being that visual person, I knew where I was in the context of figuring out an E&M note. So hopefully that will help you with that.
Get more CPC exam tips, coding certification training, and CEU credits. Go to www.codingcertification.org.